Welcome to the new edition of the AMS Impact Webinars. So glad you're joining us. Today we'll explore the tension every entrepreneur faces sooner or later, the balance between his dreams and external pressure. Entrepreneurship often starts with an ambition, a vision, a dream, but at some point you're confronted with expectations from investors, the board of directors, or the market. So the question is, how do you stay true to your mission without losing touch with reality? How do you pursue growth without relying on fast capital? Today we welcome three voices who have each navigated the tension between growth and values in their own way, through teaching, investing and building. First up, Robin de Kok. He is Professor of Entrepreneurship at Antwerp Management School, coaches young entrepreneurs and understands the tension between pitch and practice all too well. In addition to working with young entrepreneurs, he also is active in corporate entrepreneurship, helping established companies become more entrepreneurial. His academic research focuses on founder identity and sustainable growth models. Anouk Schoors is Investment Director at the Nest Family Office with strong vision for sustainable entrepreneurship. She advocates empathy and vulnerability as core values in investment, and she challenges traditional venture capital models. Louis Verkraayen is co-founder of Planet B, a company in sustainable, fast-moving consumer goods that aims to combine impact with scale. He shares how he balances growth ambitions, investor expectations, while staying true to his values. Welcome to the three of you. But of course, we want to hear from you as well. If you have questions, drop them in the chat and we will get back to them during our live Q&A. But before we dive into the conversation, Robin will provide some context. He'll take us through the tension between founder dreams and investor pressure and how traditional venture capital models can be enabling but also limiting forces. So Robin, you've got the floor.
Okay, well, a few months ago when we were discussing the topic of this webinar, I came to the meeting maybe a bit upset because all of a sudden we were in a different world. What happened a few months ago, Trump became the president of the US, and all of a sudden in the media you had these entrepreneurs who wanted to make money despite the negative impact they had on the society. And that's the opposite what we want to promote at Antwerp Management School. We want to find the balance between, of course, being business savvy, but also creating positive impact. And that frustrated me a bit, this new, well, it's actually an old movement that came back. And it also reminded me of how difficult it sometimes can be as a founder with a strong mission, with a strong founder identity, wanted to change the world, and then being confronted with maybe sometimes traditional investors who want to have hyper growth, who want to realize an exit, who want to have a financial return, despite all the other negative impacts that you can have. So this tension became even bigger in, let's say, the new world with Trump. So I really hope that there is still this counter movement that deals differently with this tension. And that's maybe also the topic of today, is to focus on how can founders, but also how can investors deal with this tension. Because in academia, you have the game theory, they call it. As an individual, we can try to change the world, but at a certain point of time, you come into a context where you face investors and you, according to that theory, need to play the game. So how do you deal with that is maybe an interesting question to start off the webinar.
Yeah, okay, because we're dealing with the tension. Anouk, you deal with investors and with founders on a daily basis. Have you seen the pressure mounting and the tension becoming more tense the last?
For sure, yes, definitely. We saw it in a kind of already, for sure, you see tendencies in, let's say, cohorts of topics of companies and startups setting up shop. And we do see that specifically in everything, we're focused on food and ag. So everything in food and ag is by nature and by definition quite sustainable. And so we already see now that there is like this hesitance in terms of, do we start, do we keep on going, because capital is less obvious now, even if the investors, specifically US based, that are targeting sustainable investments, they're less vocal about it. They still do the same work, they're still active on it, but it is it's more hidden from time to time, like in the period where you couldn't traffic any alcohol. It's kind of also like more in the back seat. But I hope that kind of the unfortunate polarization movement that we have, that is kind of pushed through, that it will also help us to convince the, let's say, the more mid-market or mid-believers towards the more sustainable side, because they see that the other side is just, I mean, it's not feasible. Even if we accelerate it, even if there's big money to be made in some cases, it will stop in the very near future, because everything's going to be finished, because the economy builds on nature for 100% of our activities.
Yeah, so do you see it slowing down now? Everyone is like looking around for better days and better timing, or what is the landscape like?
Yeah, it's slowing down for sure, in the sense that, I mean, I wouldn't call it slow it down, but more in hibernation mode, to use a terminology. But there's a lot of like the existing investors doubling down on their companies and making sure that they have enough runway, which means enough money to continue going. And then new investors coming in or they're very, very mission driven, or it takes a lot of time to convince them. But in the end, I mean, the authentic and the needed ideas, the founders with good visions are still super active and doing transactions. I mean, Louis is an example of that too.
Yeah, but Louis, you are like a success product of AMS, so you're an alumni of the training and the master classes here at AMS. What was your founder journey like?
Yeah, we started indeed at AMS. There was also, it had a lot of value because we had 1 year to really think about our business model, to make sure that we were also hyper scalable from day one, because if you want to make impact, you have to make sure that your business model is scalable. So in that regard, we thought of a lot of things. Our products had to fit the mailbox for our D2C e-commerce industry. We had time to put in place our operations, that it's scalable from day one, working together with sheltered companies, with 3PL partners, that we didn't have any blocking factors for growth. Because in an e-commerce environment, of course, if you at one day scale ×2, ×3, you don't want to. You want to make sure that your operations are not a blocking factor for your growth. So a lot of values. Also, you're young. I still lived at my parents' place. I didn't have a lot of pressure, so you really had the time to think about a lot of things and your business model, which has a lot of benefits of starting young, I think.
Yeah, so it's a good setting to be guided by the training you had.
Indeed.
Then. You say not a lot of pressure, but could you say there was some pressure for you as well to explain your dream, the vision you had towards investors?
Of course, we needed capital to start the business, so in that regard we had some pressure, but we also made sure that we solve a real pain. It's not only about sustainability. You have a lot of people that are looking for sustainable alternatives, but not a lot of people want to pay for a sustainable alternative if it's just more ecological. So we had to think about, okay, what are the main drivers in this category? It's still price, it's still efficiency, it's still convenience. So we made sure that in our R&D process, which also took a long time, that we created products that are not only sustainable, but also could compete on an effectiveness level, who are just more easy to use than traditional brands, and that can compete on price level. And that's still the main driver in our category. And our products are not more expensive. They are easier to use. They can compete on an effectiveness level. And on that, in that regard, we make it a bit a no-brainer to choose a sustainable alternative. So that's something you have to think about from the start when developing a product, that it's not that you know the main drivers of your category, and that you also play in that playing field.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point to highlight in terms of, let's say, entrepreneurship and sustainability, but just at large, I think, out of the startup world and also in terms of bigger businesses, is that it's it's a condition to be sustainable for the future from a financial perspective, and so you need to get money in, but then also as a value proposition, like a do no harm principle. But if, for example, in the food sector then, to take another analogy, if the taste is not good, or if your product is going to, like, for example, subscriptions to a farm where you can go and harvest your own food, it's really nice, but you need to accommodate for the angle, like a family with 2 kids, with 2 working parents is going to have a hard time driving 15 minutes to harvest their food, wash the food, and then eat it all together. It's cool if you do it as a weekend activity, but it's like the convenience aspect of it and stuff like that is very important. And I think in the entrepreneurship angle, like there's the mission, there's a vision, and the idea of making the world a better place and having a solution that fits to that. But the real world touch points and the pragmatism of what is offered needs to be almost like a daily check of an entrepreneur setting up a business. And I think that is something that in the courses that Robin leads that's the touch point that you have, that someone keeps you accountable in terms of you can dream big, but what is a translation to the daily pragmatism? Yeah. Because otherwise it's never going to fly.
Yeah. Coming back to the students that are in your course, at what stage are they exactly in their founder story there? Like all over the scales?
We have different programs at AMS. We have scale-up programs, but we also have the Master in Sustainable Innovation Entrepreneurship, and they come in from all over the world. So it's fantastic to see. I think, Louis, in your class, maybe we had 14 different nationalities. They come with different angles and try to solve some of the biggest problems, or start to solve some of the biggest problems in the world. And then bringing them together is always a challenge, but if it works out, then we really can create impact. And we are constantly working on this tension between, okay, we want to have a positive impact and we want to be business savvy. Those two we try to combine in one, and then it can be much more powerful than if you would focus on one of these two components only.
And then what could be a trap they fall into if they do a first pitch?
Yeah, it's a coincidence, but I wrote a book on pitching called Mastering the Pitch. And there I have the 4 P's of pitching. And I think in every P you have something that you see with young entrepreneurs that they forget to do. Think about the typical tech founders. Often they go way too deep in the technology because they're in love with the technology. But if you're pitching in front of an investor, you also need to show the business value. Because an investor thinks, if I put €1 in your business, how much do I get back from it? So you also need to answer that question in your pitch. Another thing that I like a lot is that they have their personal why into the pitch and connect it so that you show your drive, that you show that you wake up in the morning to do this startup because you're convinced that we need to solve this, and that's the signal that you give to the investors. And maybe a last thing is that often they have already some traction or some validation, but they don't show it in the pitch. They have letters of intent. They have, even sometimes I saw pitches where the company already had revenues, but they didn't mention it. And the atmosphere in the room can sometimes change dramatically. All of a sudden, if you see that there is market traction, but you have to, of course, use it in your pitch.
Yeah, and do you do some investigation about who is going to be in front of me as an investor, and maybe I tailor my story a bit to what they expect me to say, or is there a risk in doing so?
It's double, right? I mean, you want to be informed as to who you're speaking to, and as an investor, you want to get the impression that they know whatever public information is available, that is something that they at least read. Sometimes we get pitches in that they send us through, which is for hydrogen activity. I mean, by itself, a really beautiful business, but it is, if you look at our website, not at all related to what we do. And then you already disengaged from the first second, and it makes kind of a bad impression as to, I mean, you're not prepared in what you're doing. On the other hand, I think it's a danger zone for a founder to try to say what an investor wants to hear. Because sooner or later you're going to skip a beat or miss a step and stumble. and that's also, I mean, what you mentioned in your introduction, I like a founder to present him or herself as, I mean, being vulnerable is it's a weird terminology in a way, because vulnerable is not weak. Vulnerable means it's open. It's in terms of the authenticity that comes with it, and the fact that it's someone who embodies and ingrains what she or he is building, and that it comes from that personal mission or a broader mission that is put in place. And for me, the story of the business, like what is the web of life that it needs to weave, and what is that story moving forward? How does the founder see that story, and where is that in the end that web placed? And I think that if a founder can engage his audience or her audience, which in a pitch is the investor, it's like any other person that is writing a book or singing a song. You engage the audience with emotion, with a story, with something that sticks, and then as such, once you grasp their attention, they're also more eager to listen.
And do you have an example of such a pitch where the vulnerability showed to be an asset?
I had a founder. It was a female founder, just as a small side note. But she said at some point we had a question around her business model, and she said literally in that pitch where she said, "Look, I don't know. That is why I'm here for because that's why I would like to partner with you as an investor, because I feel that you are the right investor around my table to help me solve that issue." Mm-hmm. And I think that is the most honest answer that I've come across so far.
Yeah, and you also have in the literature the power of powerless communication, and it's an example of a professor, I think at Wharton, Adam Grant, who needs to teach in front of military leaders of the U.S. And the first time that he does that, he says, "Oh, I'm good in that. I'm good in. I have experience with that," and so on. And then it backfires during his class. Second time, he does it totally different, and he says, "Okay, I don't know all the answers here, but we're here today to co-create," and so on. And that worked really well in the context, of course, of giving a class. But the same mechanism can also work in a pitch in front of investors where you're honest, because sooner or later they will figure out, and if they figure out that you were not honest from in the beginning, then you are really in trouble.
Louis, do you recall your first pitch, and how did you do on the 5 Ps?
I think that's a main thing that you learn also at AMS, pitching in a structured way. But I hear a lot of things that I'm a big fan of. I think it's all about managing expectations. Be transparent to your investors. I'm also a more conservative entrepreneur. Like I'd rather be conservative and overperform than promise the moon and don't perform. And also being transparent and vulnerable about your challenges. I think that's the key. If you want to have a good match with an investor, be transparent about the challenges to see if you're right, that he can maybe help you with those challenges. Plus, I think it's also just an entrepreneur should just start soon enough with raising, that you are in a position to choose the right match with an investor, and that you're not in a time pressure need and have to just choose an investor because you need the money. If you start soon enough, you will find the right match. But I'm totally on board that just be transparent about your challenges, and you will get the most concrete feedback and the biggest personal growth also, because you won't grow as a person if you say I know it all. And just be transparent, manage expectations. Look, this I know, this I'm gonna test, this I need help with. That's why I'm reaching out to you, because I think you could be a match to overcome these challenges. And then you will see if there is a match or not with the investor.
You can't create a connection with an investor if you say I know everything. Then the investor is like, okay, you don't need us apparently. Yeah. So it's also a way of connecting with people. Like, I don't know everything, but working together with you can help to have not only the money, but especially also the expertise, the social capital, and so on.
Yeah, you talk about a choreography even between the founder and it's a dance.
It's a dance. Sometimes literally so. No, the importance, the analogy of a choreography I find is beautiful in the sense that you have, so there's a context in which you play, right? A business context, a market context, which is your music in a way, and you need to attune to the music, because if you don't, then obviously you're not going to be able to surf a certain wave. On the other hand, like in the dance itself, and then it's a pairing dance, obviously it's not just a choreography of someone solo dancing, which also is beautiful in its own way. Where there's a certain timing that you need to respect. There's trust. I mean, if you do a lift, for example, the person needs to lift someone up. I mean, there's 100% trust that you need to have that a person is not going to drop you. And then there's a mutual responsiveness in the sense that if you step back, I need to follow you. There's one taking the lead and the other one following, but sometimes in the choreography that changes. And so the same thing happens with investors and founders, is that at some point you do a pitch and you say, I have help. I mean, I need help on this. This is my idea. I'm trying to tailor this. The investor is listening, is soundboarding. And at another moment in time, all of a sudden, it can switch where the investor can say, hey, have you thought about that opportunity? Or I spoke to these people, or I have seen this in another company. Shouldn't that be something that we could also look at? And then it's the founder that follows the lead, I mean, if you put it that way. And so in that sense, I think it's it's a choreography of some sorts. It starts with dating and then it ends with dancing.
Yeah. So how did your dance go? You're perfectly happy with?
I'm super happy, yeah. Again, taking time for the right investors, and I'm super lucky with the investors I have right now. If I'm panicking, I can call them at whatever time in the night and they will always give good advice. But yeah, it all comes down again to reach out, to ask for help again. And my personal, you grow the most as a person if you surround yourself with the right people, and if you're just transparent about the challenges that you need to overcome.
Yeah. What would be your advice for a young founder looking for investors? What do they need to think about? Is there a list of things that need to be
ticked? They need to do their homework first.
Yeah.
The homework on, I would say, on yourself even. What type of entrepreneur am I, and what do I want to achieve with the business I have?
So that really some soul searching and self-identity.
That goes back indeed to the founder identity, getting to know yourself as an entrepreneur. Which type of entrepreneur am I? I think it was also in our classes where we discussed different types of founders, and where I said, which type of founder are you? And you started to reflect on which type of founder
Could you give some examples? Which types of founders maybe the audience will have an idea of where to...
Yeah, I don't want to get too deep into the academic literature, because then at the end of the call we don't have any people left. But
which one is Louis?
I can also pick on I think that's really a big learning on that whole year, because you work a lot on personal development there. And in the beginning I thought, okay, again, writing that whole personal development. But afterwards you really start seeing the value that you just know what you're good at and what you're not good at, and that you just focus on what you're good at. And when I was in university before, you always focus on what am I not good at, and you start feeling like But here you learn, okay, there are certain aspects that I really excel in, and I'm just gonna focus on that, and I'm gonna make sure that on the topic that I don't excel with, or the personality trait that I don't excel with, that I surround myself with those people that can add on that.
Yeah.
I'm more I get energy from relationship building, but I'm not the most structured or most the guy that's gonna implement processes or systems in a company. So in that regard, you start thinking, who would be my ideal founder in that regard? So that was also super helpful that you have a year also to know what you're good at, you also know what because you get to learn other people also on a very deep personality level, and that you form the right founding team from the start, that you don't have 4 profiles that are the maybe chaotic.
It is funny because I often invite people to class that did the MIE or MSIE 10 years ago, and then I asked them, okay, what did you learn at AMS that you still apply even today? And then I expected all my frameworks, but they said I really got to know myself, my strengths, just like Louis said. So that's something
that's
that
of
comes
real
back.
value.
Yeah. So getting to know your founder identity is
And as an
important.
investor, you see it instantly whether a founder, and just in general, like whether a person knows him or herself. And it is like there's a certain aura of certainty and security without being arrogant, that you know this person knows, like, is rooted in a way, and that's a difference that you see when someone even walks in the room. You know that there's a difference, and then when you start asking questions or you start to get deeper, very often it proves that it's just someone that knows intrinsically what she's good at, how she behaves, where she gets energy from, and what we just said, like how to complement him or herself.
Yeah. Okay. And that's the first thing, is to get to know yourself, do your homework on yourself. The second thing, of course, is then if you know that very well and you did your calculations, your funding gap and so on, then of course there is a landscape of different type of investors that could potentially fit with your purpose, with your identity. Mm-hmm. And that's an important exercise, because if you don't do that in the beginning, sooner or later you will figure it out, and then it's maybe too late. Yeah. Then you're stuck, maybe.
Okay. So. We dive into some questions from the audience already. Let me see what we have. Okay. First question from someone watching the webinar is: what if you're already deep into a partnership with an investor, but who then you get to know that he doesn't share your vision?
Worst case scenario, and it's something that generally I would hope investing and also like entrepreneurialism, or whatever the word is something. It's a people's business first and foremost, right? You connect with people, you collaborate with people, whether in your teams, your investors, your stakeholders, your customers. So if you do that alignment and that intrinsic motivation in terms of what is my authenticity, where do I come from, and why do I start this business, normally you will also start partnering with the people that adhere to that idea. Of course, at some point along the way, just as in any relationship, something can happen that you have a little bump in the road, and some bumps are deeper than others or higher than others. And then the idea for me is that if you keep on being transparent in your communication, and that you continue to see it as what Louis said, as a relationship where you can rely on each other, and that going through the difficulty will make you stronger, then I think it's a good outcome. Now the issue is when the biggest issue is when the trust, or let's say the partnership itself is tricky, right? Whether it's a person's issue, a people's issue between the investor and the founder or the founding team, then that becomes a whole other game. And at some point, I mean, if it cannot be mediated, if there's no solution, then I mean, seeing whether that investor can sell his or her shares, whether as an entrepreneur you can buy them back, whether there's an intermediary solution to it, that you can part ways, is a last case resort. But
did you ever come across such a situation?
Well, we study it also in academia. There are studies showing that by the third financing round, 52% of the founders are replaced by a CEO. I don't know which.
It's almost quite because it was our third time.
Yeah.
But again, you have to be transparent, because if we start at Browse, we don't have to be naive about it. There is a starting shot. Like, you go with investors, there needs to be return. So we always pitch 5-6 years, we're gonna go for that exit. And now we came in a position that there were also opportunities like that. But I was thinking, what would I do? I would also like to do always something in sustainability. I like the B2C market. And then Planet B also came on the radar, but it's also a growing business. It's not that we want to put the money for growth. We don't want to start exiting investors. So I'm super happy again by being transparent to investors. Like, look, I want to do this way longer than this. That they also all stepped in that new Planet B merger story, because I also just believe in it long term. But again, it's all about transparency. Talk about the conversations that you have and why you believe that that's the best option is, and then you can also always
transparency, honesty, authenticity.
Yeah, and I'd be curious because I mean, there's also statistics that show that a founder CEO replacement by another CEO is like, I don't know the exact percentages, I'll rely on you on that, but my understanding is that it's under 1% of successful cases where it's like the replacement is successful. There's another, that's when the investor is driving, or the investors or the board of directors are driving the change. I think it shows again to the vulnerability and the maturity of a founder when he or she says that their talents and their strengths are not fit anymore with the stage of the company and the next stage is for growth. And that they want to hand it over to someone else that has the expertise or the experience, and that they keep on working in their strengths. And I think it's a favor that those founders do to themselves rather than to anyone else, of course also to the company. But I see so many founders that want to continue building the company and go far beyond their capabilities or strengths and their learning possibilities. Because at some point there's also the thing that you can continue learning, but you also need to get energy from it. And if that balance is not right, then you're going to deplete yourself and nobody is going to benefit from that. And so handing over the I don't know the expression in English technically, but when you hand over the stick, I didn't want to call it a stick, but when you hand over the stick, it's a strength from a founder that they say, look, I'm going to bring the company to this stage, and then my work is done because I want to focus on these angles within the business because I love the sales or the research or the processes or the operations. I'm not the right CEO anymore, and I hand it over.
That's also founder identity. Where do I position myself? I know myself very well. I know what I am capable of and what doesn't give me any energy.
And it's an interesting topic, the transition from founder to more CEO, manager. Is the founder always the right person to do that? Sometimes it is, not necessarily, but sometimes it is. But how do you make that jump from a founder to a manager, maybe of a company that is already quite substantial with quite some...
And ego is very often the bad guy or girl around the table.
It's like the journey that I'm now from CEO now to commercial side more, where I'm really my field. So it's funny to see that even on the years, it's exactly the same timing. It's nice.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Cool. So let's dive into some other questions. So we discussed attention. Now let's see some alternatives. How can we break that tension? Robin, you deal with founders, you see investors as well. So what are the alternatives to venture capital?
Well, first of all, you need to ask the question, do I need external capital? There is also a way around.
Okay.
There's bootstrapping, as they call it. So you can also do it with the resources at hand and try to make that work and see whether you can generate an income that you can reinvest again. And that way you are not depending on external capital. But often you probably need it to grow. There's an interesting framework of Noah Wasserman. It's called, he wrote a book.
To be linked in the notes afterwards?
Yeah. We will put it in the email.
So the founder's dilemma, where the question, one of the dilemmas is, do you want to be king or do you want to be rich? So if you want to be king, it means that you keep the ownership for yourself, but you don't allow external capital to come in, so you maybe miss some growth potential. And then the other option is that you let external capital in, but then you lose a bit of the ownership and you're not in full control anymore. So this is also maybe a founder's dilemma that and sometimes and that's exceptional, you are still the king and you are getting or rich, as they call it in the model. So that's an interesting dilemma as a founder also in the beginning. So maybe an alternative is bootstrapping.
Yeah, and did you ever consider that alternative?
For sure, yeah. I think Flanders is a very nice environment to start a business. You have FLYO subsidies, you have Flanders Investment Trade, you have PMV, you have a lot of options for non-dilutive cash. But I think also you can have external investors and still be in the driver's seat. I think money is one thing, but the terms are more interesting. Sometimes it's maybe better to go for a lower valuation, but with other terms where you still stay in the driver's seat than go for the hyper valuation and lose indeed control of your vision and mission. That's really something that we want to avoid at all costs. But I think there is a way, again, if you start soon enough and you can make that fin mix of non-dilutive first, and you attract also some external capital, and you're in a position of, I don't need the money. I always start 12, maybe minimum 9 months when I see cash is going on an interesting level. I was not finding the right word. That you just start soon enough, and then you can find the right investors under the right terms, and you can have also a big part of non-dilutive subsidies, loans.
Yeah, but it's a course you don't do by yourself. So you have the investors, but there's also the advice to have a sounding board who are not financially invested. Could you elaborate on that?
Well, I think it's an idea that I'm juggling with from like also the broader mental well-being crisis that we're facing in the world, but then also specifically in everything which is founder and entrepreneurship community, that it is very lonely at the top, right? And from bigger companies, the CEOs can participate in big networks like YPO or Entrepreneurship Organization, EO, I think it's called, to have these sounding boards of peers and like-minded people. But I've always wanted to have this idea that as a founder you could rely on some council of sages or wise men and women that have specific experience, expertise, that doesn't need to be rational and quantitative only, but also from a personal growth perspective, right? And so a lot of founders that I know work with coaches, pay for that out of their own pockets, etc. Because I mean, there's no free lunch around that. But I think it would be even stronger if you could have this network of people from different whether industries or backgrounds that as a founder you could tap into. And whether that is then, let's say, one big network of, 15 people that can help different founders based on what they need, or whether it is a founder-led thing where they say, look, I want to build my own advisory board, someone that technically does not expect anything in return from you, right? Because a board of directors, even if it is someone who is not invested, it's an independent member, they take a liability on every decision that is made in your company. So by definition, it's going to be a bit of a and it's, when I'm sitting on a board, I'm not there to be a friend, right? I'm constructive, but I'm not there to say yes to everything that gets presented. I'm there to spar, to challenge, to be a soundboard. While for me, a science, more of a wellness, well-being board is a board that helps you lift up rather than challenge. So
I'm guessing that's part of the course as well.
Yeah, well,
giving this advice.
I was thinking about one specific program. We also guide the spin-offs of the University of Antwerp, and one element in the program is that we put them together and they have to pitch towards each other, and then they also learn each other's struggles. They learn where they are sometimes professor leaving their job or postdocs and so on, so they are in the same situation, and that helps a lot because you create in the little program, you create a community feeling, and then they also called each other when they had struggles, and that helps a lot.
So no remuneration for those people, they're just doing it because they want to help.
Everyone gets something out of it. If it's a community, and I think that is also something that I think we're moving towards it. I'm wondering whether it's because it's in the niche that I'm playing in, and that it feels like everyone is kind of adhering to that. But I also feel that there's more longing and more need for community, because online, fine, all that you want, but the physical connection and constructive thinking. Because today, like, entrepreneurship is a conquest, right? Everything is seen as a chess game or as a war, and we need to convince investors, and it's them against us. And then there's a market, and we need to fight. And there's this hustle mentality, and we need to get as much money as possible for the vanity of it all. But what if we shift from conquest to community, to collaborativeness, and where we think about more sound ways of helping and sparring with each other, but also from thinking about growth, because growth at all costs is just not feasible. And secondly, I think that it is more rewarding, and I see it with many of the people that we work with, and I see it with myself, that it's way more rewarding if you have this personal mission that, okay, it might be that you lose a little bit more of your company, or you don't scale as fast, or your company won't be worth as much when you sell it, or I like to think about it as handing it over to the next steward. But
it's also, just before we started here, we were talking, and Louis was saying, I had calls this year with several students of the current cohorts. So that's also helping paying it
something
forward.
that I was super surprised about. You say there is no free lunch, but I've so many advisory boards that just like to help, and I have it once in a while, and we sit together. They don't ask money for it. They're just
how do you find those people?
Yeah, again, I think we are in a great environment there. We did start at KBC, we did Birdhouse Accelerator program. I mean, as many entrepreneurship communities as possible. I think as a young entrepreneur I have to, because I have to learn a lot. Netwerk ondernemen, an Unizo even, a VOCA. You have so many communities. And I was really surprised, and like Robin said, I also get sometimes questions of young entrepreneurs, and I think it's just in our nature that we like to help others. And I'm a bit flattered even if some people come to me and they ask, I have a certain idea, can I just have a little sparring moment with you? And I have the same with my big mentor network. I can give them a call, and yeah, it's
is that atmosphere typically Belgium, or is it in America just the same?
I think it works in all different ecosystems that are very entrepreneurial and network driven, in the sense that also like where venture started in Silicon Valley, because that's initially still the real VC backable model, is when you can actually blitz scale, what they call it, and do 10x on what your initial investment was. I mean, it is built on networks, and if you see there's different accelerators that have been launched. Israel, for example, is also a very tight community that is really entrepreneurial, and you see that those ecosystems that are successful, there's legal conditions obviously, but the successful ecosystems in entrepreneurship are the ones that have tight networks, communities, and when there's a mindset of helping. And I agree with you, like there's no free lunch from a payment perspective, but what I mean with there's like, I get from Robin, I give to you, and then you give to Mieke, and then as such, like it turns around and you pay it forward, it comes back to in one way or another. That's what I meant with there's no free lunch.
We're also lucky that Belgium is a village also.
Yeah,
I mean,
everyone knows everyone.
My co-founder, Manoush, is from Germany. He always says like how it's so connected, like the entrepreneurship ecosystem in Belgium is, everybody knows each other. Like, it's quite a village.
Yeah, that's why all those nationalities come to the courses at AMS as well, I'm guessing.
Maybe one of the reasons, yeah.
And of course, you're the professor.
My frameworks, of course.
Yes, of course. Yeah. We're touching the end of the questions I had for you. Just to wrap up, what would be your single piece of advice you would give a founder at the start of his journey? I start with you.
I'm gonna refer to the frameworks of Omi. I think
that's good. Yeah.
Frameworks. I think one sentence that you say a lot is just get outside of the building and no assumptions inside. Get the hell out. For me, that's really key again, and it's combined with that vulnerability and the transparency. Just get out. You would be surprised if you connect with very interesting people on LinkedIn or on a networking event. How many people want to help you? but you have to get out with your ideas, you have to get out with your challenges, with your problems that you have to have that personal growth. But you're not gonna find it if you sit in your room the whole day, think that you know it all. Then there is not gonna be growth, and you're not gonna have the right people around you to steer your company to the next level or
So
to have the personal
go
growth.
outside.
Yeah.
Anouk.
I would say if your capital costs you your values, then it's too expensive.
Okay.
I think that,
Good advice, practical, very specific. Robin?
The first exercise that I do when entrepreneurs come to me, and Louis knows that, is think about what is exactly the higher mission behind my concept, because this higher mission can convince customers, can convince employees to come and work for you, can convince investors also. And I think the first exercise that we do is to put the founders individually, make a movie and explain what is a higher vision, and then they send it to me. And I looked up whether I still got the movie of Louis of 6 years ago, and we're going to play it. No.
My heart
You just started sweating.
I was already
We're nervous. No, but that is a really important exercise to think about the higher mission.
So,
Also motivate
it should be the
yourself.
same now, 6 years
Let's do
or
the test.
okay.
Maybe, yeah.
No, but
Did you find the movie, first of all?
I have the movie. I have the movie.
All right. Let's summarize what we've heard today and discussed today. Firstly, investment, it isn't just about money, it's about trust. It's a dance choreography, and trust comes from being real and open. Secondly, your pitch is your starting point. It sets the tone for your relationship with the investor. Don't just tell them what you think they want to hear, but instead tell them where you want to go. And thirdly, you're not meant to do this alone. Find people who will push you and who will have your back. And don't be afraid to look beyond the usual mentor types. There are other alternatives. We've got some time for questions in the Q&A. There's a specific question for Robin. We discussed zebra startups in one of your sessions. How can they shape their business model to still attract meaningful investment?
Yeah.
Maybe zebra startups, for those who do not know it.
Well, we obviously have the unicorns. The unicorns who have a valuation of above 1 billion. There were this counter movement that actually says, okay, maybe we shouldn't only focus on devaluation and on getting as much money back from it. Maybe we should also think about or measure even what is the impact that we're making. So these zebra startups are also and even mainly busy with what is the impact, the positive impact that we're making. And then of course the tension becomes clear with if you have external investors, how do you manage to have positive impact and still can also satisfy your investors? So that is, I think, the question. So I'm also looking to my colleagues to see what their first opinions are.
Go ahead.
For me, it's indeed spot on. Don't promise the moon and create a valuation, because you're gonna write yourself stuck. Base your valuation, put a reasonable valuation on numbers that maybe are realistic. Because I know many startups, also from other countries, that start with a crazy valuation. They can't keep up. They need investment again, and a devaluation is the last thing that you want. So just be realistic and don't go for the valuation. Just go for growth in your business, attracting the right investors for the right. Yeah,
and that brings back also to the point, like entrepreneurship. In the early days, it was all bootstrapped, right? You were building something in your garage box. I mean, there's so many founder stories that you're almost sick of it, in terms of like, okay, the garage again. Like, how many garages can there be? But like they start like that, and they live out of their vans or whatever, and they set up a business, and they build something that has value and that they show has value, and then they go to investors and they attract funding. Now these days, funding is so available, or was so available at least, it has been going in waves, that founders say, okay, but it's so easy to get money. I have a pitch deck with an idea. I sell the moon, to use your terminology. I go to the investor believes in it, and what I say I already have, I'm actually building with the money that the investor is going to give me. And that as such, like sometimes it works, sometimes reality keeps, takes a hold of you and you need to wind down your business or you need to stop. And so for me, it's really like, see what you can build, what means you have, and it's always, of course, easier if you still live at your parents'. There's a lot of entrepreneurs that start like way older that have some savings or that have no savings, and so then it becomes a different story in terms of like, how can you get about it. But for me, it's really if you can build the vision, a business needs to be sustainable from a financial perspective too. Like it needs to function in that way, because otherwise it's philanthropy, which has its own merits. But there's no case where your impact will be, let's say, I don't want to say a higher cause, but where your impact is going to feed you as a founder, and you can be more realistic about the returns that you want to generate, which I'm a full advocate of, because I don't think that we need to continue building on double-digit returns all the time, but there needs to be a return. And your investors want to see that, but you as a founder too. And once you have a value proposition that marries the impact with a sound business case, then, I mean, investors are going to subscribe to that.
And there is also some research showing that impact-oriented startups like these zebras have 43% higher chance of scaling. So if you can connect this impact story and the impact that you want to make with the business savviness, I think then
it's
you
of your
have the
own
most powerful
I think if I can add one more thing, and also if you don't do creative or don't raise extra amount of money, you also you're really on top of your cash, on top of your cash. You're not doing creative stuff, and I think that's in line with that success rate, because that are mostly the founders that are very realistic with the amount that they're raising and what they're gonna spend that money on. If you're in that bootstrapping phase, every euro that you invest needs to go.
We go to the very last question because I have to respect the timing. It's a question for each one of you. So, what is the biggest challenge you are currently facing in balancing profit and purpose, and how do you see that balance shifting over the next 5 years?
I think
Louis first.
Balancing profit and purpose. I think for us, very concrete. We have ingredient costs that start rising. Your production costs that start rising. We live in a Belgium environment where even, let's call it, labor is also very expensive. Now we start looking to internationalize those, also to be able to, like I said, our vision is really we can make impact if we can compete also on a price level to the big boys. But if that climate is changing and your costs are rising, it's a difficult balance. Like, every year we ask ourselves, should we raise our prices now, or should we just be happy? We're never happy with that, but we should accept that our margin may be a bit lower and just go for huge volume. And that's always a difficult balance that we need to.
I think that the balancing between profit and purpose is a discussion that we have now, that in 5 to 10 years time we will look back at and we will laugh. We're like, profit and purpose. It's kind of like there is no way for me, at least, to take a look at a business and say this business is continuing to do harm to society at large, whether that's people's well-being or whether that's nature, and continue on a growth trajectory, because our resources are finite, our health is under distress because of the way we eat, the way we live, and so if we do not adjust our businesses to fit with the natural cycles of nature, of our humanism in a way, then there's no way that we're going to continue make a profit. So for me, balancing profit and purpose is just like, it's like talking about work-life balance. Like, work is part of your life. You can't balance the two, because there's, I mean, that's at least my opinion. So for me, shifting in the next 5 years, I think in the next 5 years we won't talk about balancing that anymore, because purpose will be at the basics of the companies that are realizing a profit.
To build on that, I fully agree with Anouk. I think, but I already expected this already this year, and that was going back to what I said in the introduction, that was a bit my frustration, is that we came into a Trumpian world where entrepreneurship is again back to the old days. So I think that is the biggest, for me, the biggest challenge. All of a sudden, it's not obvious anymore to also focus on purpose.
I think it's less verbal though, because from the people are less outspoken about it, but intrinsically, a lot of the entrepreneurs are still putting purpose at the core of it.
I also believe that, and that's also what we want to do at AMS, is to educate the entrepreneurs in a way that they are creating meaning first, and then money will follow. That kind of principle is, I think, very important.
I'm also not too worried. Trump can say what he wants, but it's maybe not a nice thing to think about, but natural disasters will keep on coming, and also health disasters will keep on coming. Research is growing into that field, so
we already see that it's backfiring.
And a positive note to that is that every crisis for me is a good opportunity to reevaluate, and I think that what is happening now is that thanks to the stances that he takes, and I think he gets way too much attention, but thanks to those stances, people that are really doing the right thing and that are really building sustainable, profitable businesses just have an extra reality check. And we move away from this dreamery ideation and we can build the companies and we're going to fund it because we all love each other, kind of to the, okay, but let's sense check this, that if we take out the love and the community and the stuff, does it really make sense? Because we can't talk about hugging each other at the moment, so let's just put that aside and let's build the business, but still with the right values underneath it. And so I think it's going to make sustainable and purpose-driven investments and entrepreneurship even stronger, just because of the reality check that we have now. And then, I mean, after that, he'll be a footnote in history.
Because if you only have to rely on the corporates, the politicians, and so on, we need the entrepreneurs to really change the world.
Don't wait on policy.
True. And we made that very apparent during this webinar. Thank you, Robin, Anouk, and Lou. This was like a sounding board for many listeners and those who are watching this webinar. Thank you for sharing your insights and your vulnerability and the stories, because balancing the big dreams with the real world pressure, it isn't easy, but it's possible with the right questions, the right support, a clear sense of direction. If this all sparked some inspiration, something with you, check the AMS courses on entrepreneurship. Leadership. We'll be sending out a follow-up email soon with the session recording, extra content, the titles of all the books that were mentioned, and some reading tips, of course. One last thing, stay curious, stay true to yourself, keep building a world where ambition and empathy and sustainability hand in hand. Now we're taking a summer break, but we'd love to see you back for the fall sessions of the AMS Impact webinar. See you then.